So, you just won't believe what happened that day. I still feel a cold sweat break out on me when I remember that crash. Sarah worked in a cleaning team that included several women and a couple of men. Unlike the men who operated the machinery, the women worked manually, carefully scrubbing every corner of the station space. They moved synchronously, like a single mechanism, without unnecessary conversations. Sarah deftly wielded a scraper and a brush, cleaning dirt from the polished floor, walls, and seats. I hate chewing gum, she muttered to herself, brushing another sticky stain off the surface of the bench. Meanwhile, her male colleagues were milling around the room in large washing machines, casually turning the steering wheel and occasionally glancing at their watches. One of them, a young, already slightly swollen guy, drove slowly past her. "Hey, Sorochka!" His mocking voice rang out. "Will you marry me?" He was driving a scrubbing machine with one hand and holding half a donut in the other. Sarah straightened up and wiped her forehead with her forearm so as not to stain it with foam from her gloves. "Where's the donut from? All the eateries haven't opened yet. Did you find it?" "Well, I found it in the waiting area." "So what?" The fat man stuffed the rest of the pastry into his mouth and wiped his greasy fingers on his uniform shirt. "You're jealous." Sarah twirled her finger at her temple, then stuck out her tongue and went back to her work. In response, the janitor burst out laughing loudly, and his laughter echoed through the empty hall. One of her shift partners smiled. "Sarah, don't pay attention to that seal." The young cleaning lady just waved her hand. After cleaning the front of the seat, she pushed the brush behind the bench to remove all the accumulated debris. The brush bumped into something. Sarah peered behind the leg and saw something rectangular gleaming dimly in the intense light of the station lights. It was a large, weighty, sparkling smartphone. She'd only seen them in commercials. Pulling it out, she tried to turn it on, but the display wouldn't light up. The phone was completely drained. She chuckled. The cable connector matched her own, and she slipped the find into the pocket of her uniform, after which she continued cleaning. Returning to the maintenance room to change the water and get cleaning supplies, she plugged her phone into an outlet and left it charging. "He's done it again," Sarah grumbled, sorting through the piles of buckets and mops that the plump young cleaner loved to leave behind. At that moment, the phone lying on the table came to life and trembled. An incoming call is displayed on the display. "Hello," the young cleaning lady said uncertainly, holding the phone to her ear. "Hello," an excited male voice answered. "You have my mobile phone, which I lost yesterday. Please give it back to me. I will pay you a very decent reward. You can be sure of that." "Okay," Sarah replied. "Of course, I will return it. I don't need anyone else's." There was a sigh of relief from the other end of the line. "Thank you very much," the man said. "Where did you find it?" "Yes, here, actually, under a bench at the station among the garbage," the girl replied. "Well, that's what I assumed." The man couldn't calm down. "You can't even imagine how important he is to me. My name is Eugene. I'm away right now. I won't be able to return to the office until the middle of the day. Could you bring the phone to my office and give it to my assistant, Caleb? I will arrange for him not to skimp on the reward." Sarah, not hiding her enthusiasm, replied, "Of course, dictate the address. My shift ends at lunchtime, then I can bring him." Eugene gave her the address of the corporate building and the contact number of the assistant. Sarah recorded this data in her old phone. When she put down the phone, she felt her stomach churn with joy. She already imagined how she would be able to buy herself new autumn boots to replace the leaky ones. The end of wet feet, she thought. After finishing her shift and changing into her casual clothes, Sarah warned Caleb in advance that she would be there within an hour and a half. Bus and subway, and then on foot. The road to the desired address turned out to be long. She went outside, where a bulky glass and concrete structure towered right in front of her. Sarah took out her phone as she walked to dial Caleb's number. "Kalubchik, I've missed you so much," she heard a playful voice from somewhere to the side. Sarah looked up from the display of her old phone and looked in that direction. A beautiful, well-groomed lady with a haughty expression stood in the shade of an awning near the entrance to the building. She was wearing an expensive fitted jacket over a blouse and perfectly pressed trousers to match the jacket. Sarah shifted her gaze to where the exquisitely dressed woman was looking and saw a young man in fashionable trousers and a shirt walking towards her from the door of the building. The gold-plated buckle of his belt glinted in the sunlight. And then it dawned on Sarah, the name was rare, and maybe this was the Caleb she needed. Not wanting to interfere with them and just wait for the young man to get free, she froze behind a pillar, becoming an involuntary listener to their conversation. "Giselle, why did you come? What if someone sees it?" Caleb said a little nervously. "He's on a business trip." Giselle snuggled up to Caleb. "I can't wait any longer. I'm on fire when I see you." "My dear, not here." Caleb tried to pull the woman away from him, changing the subject. "By the way," he called recently, "can you imagine? Our glorious Eugene, who never makes mistakes, lost his smartphone. Some dirty girl at the station found him. He's bringing it over now, and we'll see what's interesting there. The fool doesn't know that I've spied on his pin." Sarah froze. She realized that it was about her and the found phone. So that's who she is, the dirty girl from the station. Her heart sank with resentment. She turned on the video recording on her phone and pushed it out from behind the column, pointing it at the couple. "I'm so sick of living with him," Giselle complained. "Just a little more, my darling," Caleb replied. "Everything will be resolved tonight. You'll finally get rid of your annoying spouse, or rather, get rid of his corporation, and we'll rule together." "All that remains is to convince the stubborn shareholders." Giselle lowered her voice. "What if they don't want to listen to me? They will be obligated." Caleb nodded confidently. "We have already prepared a lot. The chair is already wobbling under him. All you have to do is push it with your finger, and it will collapse, burying the old order under the rubble." "You're so smart," Giselle admired. "I love your grip so much." Giselle pulled Caleb to her and they kissed hungrily. Sarah, trying not to attract attention, hurried away from the building and the kissing couple before she was noticed. She took the subway and got to the next stop. When she reached the surface, she still couldn't figure out what to do next. After hearing what she had heard, she was not going to hand the phone over to Caleb, but then the found mobile phone rang again. It was Eugene, the owner of the phone. "Why didn't you give the device to my assistant as promised?" His icy voice sounded on the phone. "I wanted to." Sarah tried to justify herself. "Caleb says you just didn't show up." The man was extremely annoyed. "Sorry," Sarah said, trying to sound confident, "but I couldn't. I'm sure your assistant betrayed you, and it seems your spouse did too. I heard them talking about you. They're plotting to take you out of business." There was silence on the other end of the line. Sarah waited. It even seemed to her that something had happened, and the connection was interrupted. She was about to say hello, but then she heard Eugene's voice, full of alarm. "Are you telling the truth?" the man asked. "What exactly did you hear?" Sarah briefly recounted the conversation she had overheard outside the office building. Eugene interrupted her. "I understood. This is not for a phone conversation. Where can we meet?" An hour later, Sarah was sitting at a table in a small, cozy diner that she had suggested. She was holding the smartphone she'd found in her hand and replaying the conversation she'd overheard in her mind. A burly man in an expensive coat entered the cafe, clearly not used to such places. He looked around, his gaze sliding over the worn tables and chairs. It was only when he saw the lonely girl at the far table that his face relaxed. He breathed a sigh of relief, walked over to her table, and asked, "You're Sarah, aren't you?" "Yes, it's me," Sarah nodded, and the man sat down opposite her. "Indeed, you have chosen the perfect place for our meeting," he said, as if continuing an interrupted conversation. "Neither my dude assistant nor my wife will ever come in here, even at gunpoint. Here we can talk without prying ears." She handed him the phone. He placed it in front of him. The screen immediately lit up, recognizing its owner. Then the man took out a purse from his pocket and counted out a substantial sum to Sarah. Sarah looked at him in surprise. "That much?" It came out of her mouth by accident. The phone, or rather what's in it, costs a lot more, he explained, noticing her confusion. Everything is fair. Sarah took the money. She had never seen such a sum. It was significantly more than she could have expected. She looked at Eugene gratefully, and thoughts of shopping were already racing through her mind. Autumn boots, she thought. Another new coat wouldn't hurt. I'll manage until spring somehow. At the same moment, she realized that this man would not cheat. So what did you hear? Eugene asked, looking impatiently into Sarah's eyes. Sarah took a deep breath and began her story. She recounted the entire dialogue between that rich lady and Caleb at the office building, mentioning their plans to take over the company and their contemptuous attitude towards her. Eugene listened without interrupting. His face became darker and darker. And when Sarah took her old phone out of her jacket and turned on the video, Eugene slammed his fist on the table so that even the waiters turned to look at them. Giselle, he whispered, as if to himself. Our relationship, of course, has long cooled. I knew she had affairs from time to time. This has happened before, sometimes with a fitness trainer, sometimes with a driver. I turned a blind eye to it because it was already her life, separate from me. His gaze settled on Sarah. But if all this is true, then the situation is much worse now. She didn't just take a swing at our family life. She wants to take my company away from me, my brainchild. We don't have any other children. And thank God, he sighed heavily. Now everything has fallen into place. And the losses in the last quarter, and her sudden sweetness in her speeches, and his cocky arrogance, as if everything was already a foregone conclusion. I thought I was just tired. He ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, as if trying to get rid of bad thoughts. Sarah listened to him, and something warm grew in her chest. Sympathy, understanding. She didn't see a rich man, but an exhausted, lonely man who had been betrayed by his closest people. He was just like her, only in his larger world. I have a board of directors meeting at 5 p.m. today. I have to stop them. His voice became firm. But I have no proof other than your words. Sarah, you are my only weapon. I need your help. You can become my witness. Do not refuse. For this, I am ready to pay you an amount that will solve all your financial difficulties. Sarah was confused. It doesn't matter who you are. Your voice is important. I want you to address the board of directors, he said. You told them what you heard. This is the only chance to expose the villains. And most importantly, they don't expect it. Sarah swallowed. Money wouldn't hurt in her dire situation, but here was the opportunity. Well, let's try, she agreed uncertainly. Eugene's eyes lit up. He immediately stood up abruptly. We only have a couple of hours. Let's go to the store and dress you up in a businesslike way. Sarah looked down at her clothes with concern. Why do I need your clothes? I'm decently dressed. Jeans, t-shirt, jacket. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice was shaking. Sarah, Eugene said, and smiled kindly. I understand that this is the fashion right now, but with all due respect to your ripped jeans and worn jacket, we are not going to a youth club, but to the board of directors of the company. And it is unlikely that they will seriously look at us when you appear like this. Sarah sighed. She knew he was right. He took her to one of the expensive boutiques, where they picked up an elegant business suit for her. When Sarah let down her hair, which had been gathered into a simple ponytail, and put on lipstick, Eugene froze in admiration. You are incredibly beautiful, Sarah, he said. I hope you often hear this addressed to you. Thank you, she replied softly, and her cheeks blushed. Looking at herself in the mirror, she saw herself as if in a parallel reality, a confident, strong woman. Even Caleb, the dude, wouldn't have had the heart to call her a dirty station girl. By 5 o'clock, Eugene and Sarah arrived at the office building. She felt awkward in an expensive suit, but remembering that it would not last long and that the promised reward was waiting for her, which would ease her deplorable financial situation, she straightened up and stood next to the determined head of the company. Eugene looked collected and calm, but Sarah could feel the tension in his shoulders. Come right behind me, he told her softly. Don't talk to anyone. Just stay close. I'll do everything myself and give you the floor." They entered the building and headed for the elevator. When the doors opened, a spacious conference room appeared in front of her, where everything, from a massive table to expensive chairs, seemed to scream of power and wealth. Sarah felt small and inconspicuous in this world. Men in expensive suits were sitting at a massive table, and among them were Giselle and Caleb. They both froze when they saw them enter, and a look of confusion flashed across Caleb's face, which he immediately hid. But Giselle couldn't help but sneer. The meeting has already begun. At the head of the table sat an elderly man, the chairman of the board of directors. When he saw them, he motioned for them to take the empty seats. Sarah sat up and looked at Eugene. He sat straight with his head up, not showing a shadow of excitement. His charisma and self-control were mesmerizing. "Mr. Eugene Spencer, we have just started discussing the results of the last quarter," he said dryly, looking at the head of the company. "Gentlemen," Giselle said, getting up from the table, "as one of the oldest shareholders, I am initiating a discussion of the results of the last, frankly unprofitable quarter." She looked around the room with an arrogant look. "Yes, I understand that Mr. Spencer has been running the company for many years and everything was fine. But the world is changing fast. We need to adapt to new trends and change our strategy." "Fresh blood," said one of the oldest shareholders, shaking his head. "Mr. Spencer always did well." "Recent results suggest the opposite." Giselle smiled triumphantly, not looking at her husband. "And I suggest that Caleb be considered for the position of the new chief executive officer. Young, ambitious, and, most importantly, experienced." When she was done, she sat down, giving Caleb a loving look. Eugene Spencer stood up, and the room fell silent. Sarah watched him with admiration. He was so calm, so confident, that her fear began to recede. "Dear shareholders," his voice was firm, "the losses of our company are not my fault, but the result of sabotage. Caleb, as my assistant, had access to all the financial documents." "Are you saying that I'm guilty?" Caleb laughed out loud, getting up from his seat. "Eugene, don't try to pass the blame on to others. You are currently the head of the company. You bear the main responsibility, which means that you are responsible for the decline in income." "Yes, I am responsible for everything that happens in my company," Eugene replied. "And therefore it is my duty to find the reason for our losses. And I found the culprits." He turned to Sarah and pointed at her. "This woman is a living witness to the conspiracy of my assistant and my wife against the corporation." The shareholders looked at Sarah in disbelief. Caleb and Giselle chuckled. "You brought the cleaning lady from the station here to tell us stories," Caleb said contemptuously. "Gentlemen, do you believe her?" Sarah felt her cheeks burn with resentment. She stood next to Eugene, barely reaching his chin. She was scared, but she met his eyes and seemed to light up with his confidence. "I can prove my words." Her voice was unexpectedly firm. "I have a video recording." The conspirators turned pale. Sarah took out her phone and handed it to Mr. Spencer, asking him to put the video on the big screen. Eugene connected his phone to the projector, and after a few moments, male and female voices filled with gloating and betrayal could be heard in the hall. "I'll get a controlling stake." Caleb's voice sounded as confident as it had in the audience. "And I'm going to be the richest widow." Giselle's voice echoed through the office. There was a deathly silence in the room. Eugene turned off the video. "That's it, gentlemen," he said calmly. "This fall was provoked by betrayal in our ranks." The shareholders froze, looking at Giselle and Caleb, who seemed dumbfounded and completely lost. Caleb, all his arrogance gone from his face, stared at the floor. But Giselle, who wasn't used to losing, was shaking with rage. "What kind of fool would believe this video?" she screamed, addressing the shareholders. "It's a fake, a cheap installation. Don't you see? Her voice was rising to a scream. And this girl, she's just Eugene's lover. Just look at the way they look at each other. He brought her here to mock us, but he's a fool who trusted a dirty beggar who dreams of your money. Our glorious Eugene, in order to hide his incompetence, bought this beggar, dressed her up, and brought her to lie to you. Eugene looked at his wife with cold pain in his eyes. Sarah froze. Her cheeks burned with resentment, but she remained silent. Giselle, the chairman of the board of directors, said in a tone that brooked no argument, "You've crossed all boundaries. I am depriving you of the right to vote on our council." "And I'll call the police," Eugene said dully, looking at Caleb, who fidgeted under his hard gaze, "for deliberate sabotage and causing losses to the company." Caleb paled even more when he heard the word police. "Gentlemen," the chairman's voice sounded loud, "taking into account the indisputable evidence provided by Mr. Spencer, I am putting to the vote the issue of immediately initiating a legal procedure to force the repurchase of Giselle's shares as a shareholder who has caused significant damage to the company." There was tension in the hall. Everyone present except Giselle and Caleb raised their hands. Unanimously, the chairman announced, "Giselle, you lose all your rights in this company." Giselle sobbed in shock, but no one paid any attention to her. Realizing that all was lost, she ran out of the hall. Caleb hunched over and backed toward the door, but someone blocked his way. "And one more question, gentlemen," the chairman continued. "Who is in favor of Mr. Eugene Spencer continuing to serve as chief executive officer?" All hands, including the chairman's, went up again. Sarah watched the scene with bated breath. She'd only seen it in the movies. Justice had been done before her eyes. When the meeting ended and the doors closed behind Caleb, who was escorted out by security, and a sobbing Giselle, Eugene invited Sarah to his office. The tension that had been holding the poor girl down subsided, and Sarah felt her knees give out from exhaustion. She quietly sat down on one of the chairs, watching Eugene pace around the office. He closed his eyes, exhaling deeply as if he had lifted an incredibly heavy weight from his shoulders. "Sarah," he said, opening his eyes, "if it wasn't for you, I would have lost everything. I want to thank you for your help, your courage, and your honesty." He handed her the folder with the documents that the secretary had brought a few minutes ago. Sarah picked it up in surprise. "Here's your application for a job in my company. I'm offering you a position as a personal administrative assistant." Sarah looked at him incredulously. "I don't have a college degree. I'm just—" Her voice faltered. "I know who you are, Sarah," Mr. Spencer said confidently. "I know what kind of person you are. I saw how you were holding up. You're smart and brave, and I need just such an assistant by my side. You know the most important thing is how to be honest, and you will learn everything else. I'm sure." Seeing her hesitation, he leaned closer to her and continued, "And that's not all. I am ready to pay for your tuition at the university of your choice. You can get whatever education you want, and I'll help you choose." Sarah was silent. She couldn't wrap her head around everything that had happened in the last few hours. From the dreary job of a cleaner to the offer to become a personal assistant to the head of the company and get a higher education. She looked at him, and there were tears in her eyes. At that moment, she saw not a rich businessman, but a man who holds out a hand of friendship to her and believes in her. "Of course I agree," she whispered, her heart pounding with excitement. Eugene smiled and held out his hand to her. Sarah shook it gently. There was more to their touch than just business partnership, but also something more. Sarah's story, which had begun in the dust of the station, was now being continued in a shiny office full of new possibilities.